In almost every part of Ireland there are ancient stone monuments. Many of them were there before the great days of Greece, of Nineveh and Babylon, before the flood. They are massive structures built of great stones, from which they take their name, megaliths. They were mostly graves, homes of the dead, who were worshipped as guardians of the living. If the dead were left homeless, they would wreak vengeance on their children, and as they lived forever, they had to be housed in stone, itself timeless and indestructible. The houses of the living have vanished, but the remains of hundreds of megaliths stand where they stood thousands of years ago. Some megalithic remains were sites reserved for ritual. The stones were receptacles for the souls of the dead, and here a man was face to face with his assembled ancestors. The builders of the megaliths sought immortality in the magic permanence of stone. But slowly, slowly, even the changeless begins to change. Erosion lays an acid finger on orthostat and lintel. Sun, wind, and rain eat and worry patiently at the rock. Tiny organisms, lichens, mosses, rock plants, send root hairs probing into minute cracks made by sun and ice, imperceptibly winkling apart the crumbs of rock, transmuting the stones of death into the soil of life. In the Burren in County Clare, centuries of rain have carved hundreds of square miles of bare limestone into natural sculptures. A stone landscape where the imagination can interpret abstract form as it wills. Paved amphitheater, petrified sea, or fossil graveyard. Even a stone fence around a farmer's field recalls a ruined courtyard, lined with monstrous figures, built for barbarous ritual. The wealth of stone in the Burren attracted the megalith builders. Over 100 of their tombs still stand. In contrast, the dolmens of Ireland seem born, not made. Mythical monsters, fathered by the stone itself. Huge and primeval. More than any other of the ancient monuments, they evoke the power of the word megalith. One of the great megalithic monuments of Europe is New Grange, a huge artificial mound in the valley of the Boyne. The passage inside is lined with stones, each weighing many tons, and leads to a central chamber. This chamber rises 20 feet into a corbelled roof of loose stones, so skillfully fitted one above the other that it has stood for 4,000 years. Here, the dead were returned to the womb of the Earth Mother. Great goddess, whose stylized face stares out on the empty chambers. A 1,000 years ago, she saw sacrilegious Vikings desecrate this place. Long before that, she watched generations of forgotten chieftains who came first as mourners and then returned to her as mourned. The goddess still watches over life and death and the passage of the sun and moon. Through eyes given her by men, she has seen the thread of human history measured against the pulse of turning seasons. New Grange is part of a vast necropolis in the valley of the Boyne, built in the Bronze Age. Later, when the Celts came, they made the river a goddess and the great burial ground the home of the gods. The gods belonged to a supernatural race who had their palaces inside the old grave mounds, and they became known as the Mound People, or People of the She. The She could take the forms of animals and birds, and their voices could be heard on the wind in the trees they haunted, the weird and crooked hawthorns. Things were not what they seemed. Every stone had its magic, every mountain its story. To the Bronze Age farmers, their burial mounds had been the homes of their dead, built where their ancestors could watch over the farms and fortunes of the living. Their graves were objects of veneration and worship. But to the Celts, they were gateways to the unknown, to the shadowy world of the Sidhe, sometimes friendly, more often hostile, but always near to a man as his own shadow, and watching. The magic of the Sidhe was most fearful on the night between the years. This sinister night still survives as Halloween. Its true name is the Eve of Samhain, a night out of time. As the sun set, the night moved in on the departing year. The dead stirred, and the people of the Sidhe gathered themselves, waiting. A no man's land between the old year and the new. Samhain. The voices of the Sidhe moan in the trees. God and goddess stir the rivers and the roaring sea and wake the sleeping power of the tombs. They rouse even the great stones, until the sun flashes his battle cry in the face of the night, and the darkness splinters before the coming year.